Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Total Podcast with me, your host, Phil Scott. Today, I have the honor of having two wonderful authors on, but their story is quite unique. They are a mother and daughter duo, and their pen name is Heather and Quinn, but that's not their real names. But it is, but it's not. So we're going to dive into that further. But without further ado, let me have my guest on, my first guest. They are Heather and Quinn, also known as Heather MacDonald, that's a mom, and Quinn Slobodin. Did I get it right? Yay. All right. So ladies, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and we are finally able to get our schedules lined up to do that. So thank you so very much for agreeing to do this. I've been looking forward to this for a while now. So you have written a book called Journey to Juniper Junction, but you have a book coming out. Oh, and there it is. But you have the follow-up to that coming out on, is it January 25th? Is that correct?
That's right. That's it. Yeah.
So we're going to talk about we can talk about both books. I'd love to do that if you ladies are game for that. And then we're going to talk about first, if you don't mind, your background story. So I went on Amazon and I kind of got a background and it was fascinating. It was fascinating to read that. I was like, wow. So Heather, if you would, why don't you start telling me your story, and then Quinn, you can jump in and I'll let you ladies take it from there. So Heather, tell me about your background first.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having us, first of all, Phil. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Let's talk about our book and, books, right? Come January 5th, books.
Yes.
I've already started on book 3 too. So we're
wow.
Book 3 comes out this summer as well.
Awesome. So, wow. I love this. I love the pace that you're doing in it, because it's been like 6 months since your first book came out, correct?
That's right. Yeah. And that's kind of our schedule, is every 6 months. So my background was I was born in Scotland, and then I grew up in Canada. I was a baby when my parents brought us here. And then my background as a writer, I mean, I was always writing as a child, and I wanted to be a professional writer. So I went into commercial communications, and I was a PR person for a while, writing news releases and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I started writing feature articles for magazines. And that was my job when my children were young. I was writing feature magazines. We lived in the UK at the time. We moved there in 1990. My husband was doing his PhD in the UK. So I just took my business and started writing there, and it went very well. And then from there, we came back to Canada in 98, and I started doing some fiction writing. I mean, I'd always been dabbling in fiction writing, but I sold a little bit of fiction in 98. I actually have to back up also, because I also self-published a book in 1991, which I forgot, called The Busy Mom's Cookbook. And that was because Quinn, a bit of a picky eater when she was a toddler. So I thought, I'll figure that out. And so I published that. And then back home here, I just started writing a little bit of fiction, short stories, that kind of stuff, getting some of that published. And then ultimately said to Quinn one day, she knew I'd always wanted to write a book, but I tried NaNoWriMo. That was really good for me, got me to see that I could write a book, mm-hmm. but I couldn't find my niche. I just felt like, this isn't quite right. And then I was painting the house that we're living in now. My husband and I sold the big family house. We moved to a small house in the country, and I was listening to books on tape, and I love books on tape. That is really dating me. Audio books. And I was listening to children's stories, because I quite often like children's, sort of adventure stories and that kind of stuff, because they're so lighthearted and fun. And I just was in the mood for it. And I started thinking, I've had this children's story in my mind for a long time. A lot of fun, kind of the family, that kind of ideal fun family and some adventure. And so I told Quinn about it. And really, I'm going to let you take it over from there, Quinn, because that's how Journey to Juniper Junction started. So
yeah, so my story. So I was born here in Canada, And then we moved to England when I was 2, and we were in England until I was 10. So a lot of my formative years are spent there. And it gives me a really good basis for writing Gemma, because she's coming from England to Canada. So it's, I can use a lot of, I understand how she'd be feeling. But when we were little, Mum was, like she said, a writer. And I always loved that. Our lives really revolved around that. I mean, when Mum was writing her features, we would go to the reference library. It was pre-internet, obviously. And we'd go to the children's library and get kids' books, and we'd read our books while Mum did research. So reading and writing were always part of our lives. And after I finished university, I got the typical office job, and I enjoyed it, and I really liked it when it was just me and my husband. But then I had my first daughter, and I loved being on maternity leave with her, and I really wanted to be home with her. And I started thinking, what can I do to have the kind of lifestyle with my daughter that we had with my mom, where she had her own thing, and I really admired her for that. But she was also really available to us, which was wonderful.
Mhm.
So I started writing little stories for just my one daughter at the time, little poems and things like that. And then stories to help teach her lessons. So she was having, an issue with something, I'd write her a little story to help her understand it.
Mhm.
And Mom then told me about this idea that she had, and I just couldn't get it out of my head. So one night I was up with my second daughter when she was about 3 weeks old. And on my phone, I just wrote the first chapter of the book, and I emailed it to her. And I was like, Mom, what do you think of this? Will this help you get started on your story? And she immediately, wrote back to me the next day and was like, I love this. Do you want to work together? And I think secretly, I'd kind of been hoping she'd say that. I said, yes, I definitely want to work together. So that's kind of how both our experiences led us to this point of working together.
And how we came up with the name Heather and Quinn.
Oh, yes. So Heather and Quinn, I think that I had thought of it and Dad had thought of it too.
Well, you thought Heather Quinn, because they're both, Quinn is actually named after her paternal grandmother. Her last name is Quinn. So when my husband and I met, really within like maybe 3 weeks, we knew we wanted to be together. And we started talking about marriage and kids. And I said, your mom's maiden name would make a great name for our first baby. And he's like, yeah, that's a good idea. So that's how Quinn came about. So she said, Heather Quinn. And I said, great idea. And my husband said, why don't you say Heather and Quinn, like Heather and Quinn, Heather and Quinn, We were like, that's a great idea. Yeah. So that's how Heather and Quinn came about.
That was an awesome idea. Wow. That's pretty amazing. I mean, and I love that your story is so different and unique, because you don't hear a lot about mother-daughter. As a matter of fact, you're the first mother-daughter writing duel I've heard of. And so just to see how this is just worked out beautifully is amazing. So I wanted to ask you, so what has the entire process been like for the both of you, just working on this book together?
Well, first of all, the first word that comes to mind for me is joy.
Yes, very enjoyable.
Yeah, we've always got along extremely well. And we've always understood each other. We're really different people, aren't we, Quinn? Yes. I mean, Quinn, I'll say I should talk about myself, not you. But, being a mother, you can't help it. You want to say, no, Quinn is it? But yeah, I mean, I used to say to Quinn when she was 2 years old, I'd say, where would I be without you to keep me straight? Because she was so sensible, from the time she was just a little tiny girl. And I tended to be kind of a leap and then look, kind of a person. So we complement each other well, really well. And we work well together. And we don't really have a big ego involved in our work, do we? We don't really have any ego involved in our we don't protect our writing from each other. Like, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say I kind of liken it to like a ping pong game. One of us will work on the story, and then we'll bat it to the other person, who will then work on it a bit, send it back. So we each add something to the story each time we look at it. Mm-hmm. And if one of us, writes a whole chapter that the other one doesn't like, then okay, we just, put it aside and we do it again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think when you say we don't have a big ego,
that's what I mean.
That's what I mean.
Like neither of us guards our writing from the other. We're always trying to make the story better. That's the main thing, isn't it? We want the story to be as good as it can possibly be. And for us, that means that it has to be, first of all, fast paced, because children like fast paced stories.
Right.
It has to be funny, because kids are funny by nature. They like humor. You see that from the time they're tiny, right? They're always laughing. So we love to put a lot of humor into our books. And, as far as, I guess that's it really, isn't it? We really like them to be fast paced, humorous, kindly, right? And
so when we're working together, we're always trying to keep that in mind. So
Yes.
each one of us is
That
writing.
guides us.
Yeah, we try to write with that in mind, and then the other person helps us. And if one of us is struggling with a chapter or with a scene for whatever reason, often giving it to someone else.
Yes.
Yeah, who knows the story equally well, because we both know how that character will behave, because we both have written a story. So you don't have to explain the situation to the other person. You just have to say, here's the scene, this is what I've done, and you know that they know how that character will behave without having to explain anymore.
Right.
And
So that's wonderful too.
And that makes a lot of sense too. And
Yes.
I can tell also during the editing process too, that must be helpful as well.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And of course, you have to have a lot of mutual respect, right? And just know that the other, like, neither of us is ever harsh either, are we? No. Like, we never just say, well, that's rubbish, I don't like that. We just say, is that really how so-and-so would behave? Do you think that she would say that? Or, things like that. Or sometimes, I think what happens also with Quinn and I is that Quinn is very good at just kind of like the nub of the story. This is where we're going. This is what's
Right.
going to happen. And I tend to flesh it out. But sometimes I just start fleshing it out, don't I? It just becomes really big and unruly. And then I'll just, and then I send it back to Quinn and she's like, all right, Mom, just take some of that out of there, And it kind of reflects our personalities, because I'm definitely more talkative than you.
Well, how long did it take you to write the first book, Journey to Juniper Junction? How long did it take you to write the first one?
So we started at the end of, I wrote the first chapter and sent it to Mum at the end of February 2021, and it was published July 2021.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so a lot goes into it. Like, I would say the first draft was probably done by April, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
It was a solid first draft. You have your zero draft and all the rest of it, but I would say that it was a solid, readable chapter book by April. And that's another bonus too. When you've got two people working on it, you have not only got the energy of two people, but you also have the accountability.
Right.
If this person has invested their time into this project and you've agreed to work on it with them, then you have to sit down and work on it. You can't just say, today I'd rather go shopping, or the garden needs me, or something like that. So I think that really makes you buckle down and get on with it.
Yeah.
So that, because really,
there's self-imposed deadlines that are
very easy to brush aside if you don't have someone counting on you. And then I think also we involved a mentor at an early stage too. As soon as we had a first draft and we knew we had something that was good and we liked it, we thought we can see a future for this, we hired a professional children's writer mentor, and she helped us to
with the self-publishing process. So
right.
How to actually
how do we get
self-publish.
it to the next stage?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was April Cox that we hired, and she was really helpful to us.
Yeah, and that
She
really helped
us
us get there, I think, a little bit faster, because trying to understand the self-publishing would have taken forever. So when we had the first draft, having someone kind of guide us through that process,
right,
really sped up the process of getting the book out there once we had a book.
Yeah, because she calls it self-publishing made simple. And really, there's nothing simple about it. I think Quinn really summed up when she said, you don't know what you don't know. You're out there trying to figure out the publishing process, and it's really tricky. It's big and unruly, and it looks so simple when you just hear about it on YouTube because you're watching videos and all the rest of it, but there's a lot to it.
Now, for other people out there who are wanting to get self-published or just get published in general, how did you go about selecting a publisher for your book?
Well, that, something, Initially, I think that when I was writing stories myself, I was thinking about traditional publishing.
Mhm.
And all of my work in the past had been through traditional publishers because, well, that's the way it was done. Pre-internet, that's the only way really. That's not. I published my own little book in 1991 and I sold it through the back of parenting magazines, which in those days actually had one-ad columns like you used to have in newspapers, which sounds archaic now, but that's how you did things.
Right.
And that was quite successful, it was fine. You could never, and I sold it in the local bookstore as well. They were very accommodating and really keen.
Mhm.
But that you never really can get it going. Now, everything's out there for you to do it yourself. There's so many options now for people to publish. And I think through watching YouTube videos of both self-published authors, independent authors, and people who were publishing through traditional publishing houses, I came to the conclusion that we could do so much more and stay true to what we wanted to do by independently publishing. So we actually set up a publishing company called Babel Garden Publishing.
Oh, so that's your own company.
That is our own
Oh,
company.
wow.
Yes.
Well, the story even gets more interesting. Wow. I love that.
Well, that's the thing, Phil. I mean, if you want to do it professionally now, all the tools that are available to the traditional publisher, they're available to independent publishers too. Like everything that they can do, you can do. So it's a very different world to what it was prior, really, on sort of probably 2016, 17.
Mhm.
I'm not really well versed on exactly when it all started to shift, but I mean, we hire through our publishing company, professionals to help us. So we hire professional artists. Our artist Kit Lawrence Nakua, he is a professional artist. He does our covers. We hire professional editors. We hire professional, people will beta read for us, proofread. The same things that other people do, like if you are going with a big publisher. But the thing about going with the big publishers these days is that unless you're really big, you have a really big name, chances are your book is, it's down here somewhere.
Right.
And how does it ever get out? How do you ever get the word out? It was listening to traditional publishers on YouTube complaining about their situation that made us realize, well, why don't we start our own publishing company? We can do this. We're capable.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's a steep learning curve.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. And the publishing companies have a lot more money than we have as individuals. But we're having half the fun we're having too, though, is being in charge.
Yeah, being able to stay true to our vision, having our own timeline to release the books, picking our own covers, having complete control is really fun.
Yeah. And we can turn on a dime, right? We can change our advertising strategy. We can do, whatever we want to do, we can do for our book, so yeah, it's a really different world now.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a different world.
That's
and
awesome.
We're enjoying it.
That's awesome that you've been able to pretty much be in control of the entire process,
Yes.
which for me is unheard of. So that's awesome. That is
Well, there are a lot of
awesome.
people out there doing it, and they're doing it really successfully too. And that's the other wonderful thing about being independently published, is that there are so many clever people out there who are doing interesting things, and they're very, very generous with their time.
Mm-hmm.
Really generous, so
Yeah, there's a lot of resources for people who are new to the industry.
yes. Yeah.
Okay, now if you would tell us a little bit about the story, the first one, Journey to Juniper Junction, and then a little bit about the main characters in this story.
Okay, well, do you want to take that, Quinn? Do you want to start with
Sure.
telling us about it?
Yeah, basically, Journey to Juniper Junction. So that's book one in the series, and the series is called My Country Cousins. Gemma, who is our protagonist, comes from her home in England to Canada, to Almosta Farm, which is her cousin's home, and she's spending the summer here. So it's about her experiences being away from home in this new environment, being with these new people. And we try to make it funny. So there's a lot of, lighthearted situations.
Right off the bat, you start laughing.
Yeah, exactly. And our protagonist, Gemma, she's quite a reserved person. So
She's 10 years old.
yeah, she's 10 years old. And well, why don't you take over? Yeah,
Okay.
because you know her well.
Well,
I
she-
do too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we both know
We
Gemma
both know
really
her
darn well. But she's a 10-year-old girl who has, she's an only child, and she's had a pretty protected life. She lives in the city in England. She lives in Chester, England, in the north of England, which is a city we know well because Quinn grew up near Chester in England. So, we know that city. And she's aching for some adventure because her good friend Bronwyn has moved away, and she's afraid that she's going to have to go to these day camps, which she's starting to feel a little too old for. And instead, her parents proposed the idea that she go to Canada to stay with her country cousins. And she has one memory of being with them when she was 5. They were pretty rowdy, as she recalled, compared to her lifestyle. And so she's a little hesitant, but then her mother suggesting that she go to these day camps, she's like, no, I'll go to Canada. And then they tell her, you have to go by yourself. So then she's like, ooh, going by myself. She does it. And that's really what the story's about. Because so many kids, kids, when they're 10, they're just kind of on that cusp of having to do things by themselves, join into groups, go into that gymnasium full of people they don't know, that kind of stuff. So we just want to empathize with them with that and say, you're really capable, and things will happen to you though along the way, and you'll have to roll with it because Gemma's mom and dad make it plain to her, you can't come home. You're all the way in Canada. You can't ring us up 3 nights from now and say, I'm homesick, come and get me. You're going to have to go with it. So that's kind of the underlying reality that she has to deal with. And
Right.
then nothing bad happens to her. This is a feel-good series. It's entirely cheerful, and it's challenging, but never in a kind of a issue-oriented or difficult kind of way. It's just kids being kids, and what happens, and then how do you go with it? What happens when you meet the chickens, kind of thing. Which we find our readers, they love the chickens, don't they? It's just because there's lots of comedic kind of stuff in there. And that's really what it's about.
Well, I love the way, because I've read like the first few pages of that book, and I love the way you kind of set her up, where she thinks that she's going to Australia, where her friend
right.
has moved, but then she finds out her parents want to send her to Canada instead. She's like, oh,
Yeah.
wait a minute, I
Yeah.
don't know about this. So I love the way that you guys set that up. That was perfect.
Oh, well, thank you. We
Yeah.
appreciate
Yeah.
that.
You're welcome.
Love to hear that. Yeah.
That was
Yeah, and then
absolutely perfect.
The second book that we're doing in the series is called Adventures at Almosta Farm. And now it just carries on from here, where Gemma is now at the farm. She knows she's staying there. And again, lots of things happen in the following week. And she wonders, does she want to stay here? Like, she's getting a little homesick and she's feeling kind of not too sure. But what the story's really about is learning to compromise. That if you can find ways to work together and learn from your experiences and compromise, everything's better, right?
Yeah. So it's the same, and definitely the same style of book.
Same style,
yeah,
same length.
lighthearted, fast paced.
Yeah. And also, you probably noticed too, Phil, that at the end of each of our chapters, we give you a word count in the book. And that has been hugely popular with the kids because these are beginning readers. They're chapter books, but for kids who are becoming independent readers. And they tell us they love knowing how many words they've read at the end of each chapter. So
Yeah,
that's
kids,
kind of a fun little thing to
kids
do.
love that.
They do.
And having worked with kids for so many years, I mean, they love like that incentive to like,
That's
no,
right.
well, hey, I've read this many words, and now I've read this many words. So yeah, kids
Yeah.
love that. They
Really
absolutely
encouraging.
love that.
Even as an adult, you read the chapter and you're like, oh, 2,000 words. Yeah.
Well, you already answered my next question that I had for you, and that was, what do you want children and even their parents to learn from your book? And I guess you pretty much answered that.
Well, have we? I guess, yeah. We talked about that actually, didn't we? What is it that we want people to take away from our books?
I think we want them to, after finishing the book, I think we want them to feel happy, to feel, kind of a like reprieve from all the pressures of the real world. You can just go into this little world of Juniper Junction and have a good time. And feel capable, but capable and independent, but also happy and secure where you are.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's so important. Just from my own personal experience, I didn't have the greatest childhood growing up, so my escape was reading.
Right.
And I got into Beverly Cleary books. Gosh, I guess I was in maybe second grade or so.
Now, what was it about Beverly Cleary that you liked?
I could relate.
She's a real feel good, isn't she?
Yeah. And the amazing thing about her writing is that she could relate to kids at any level. I even wrote an essay and a bibliography about that, which that was my first published work, actually.
Really?
It was in grad school. It's just started off as a project in grad school, and I ended up getting it published.
Wow, that's great.
But it's called At Their Own Level, Beverly Cleary's Ramona novels. And
sweet, yeah. And Ramona's that kind of character, isn't she? She's that sort of capable. She's always getting something's always happening to Ramona, and then she has to deal with it, right? And she does. And you laugh with her. People have actually said that our books are like Beverly Cleary's books, but more modern. They're set they're set sort of late 80s, early 90s, our books. Mm-hmm. Whereas, as you know, Beverly Cleary's are probably like
50s. Yeah.
And so people have said, they're more modern, but they're pre-electronic age when kids were just kind of, free range.
And it's amazing.
They're the same kind of fun.
Right. And it's amazing because Beverly Cleary wrote the Ramona books probably from the late 50s. Beezus and Ramona, I think, was the first one, because they started off as characters in the Henry Huggins books.
That's right. Yes.
And because that's how I got into Beverly Cleary, reading the Henry Huggins books first.
Right.
And then she wrote The Mouse and a Motorcycle and all those, but the Ramona books, I think, is what she's really best known for.
I agree. Yeah. Have you read her autobiography?
I think it's called The Girl from Yamhill, I think.
That's right.
It's been many years since I've read it.
Yeah. I know. Same here. I read that when Quinn was a baby.
Wow.
Years ago. And it was good reading. I enjoyed it.
And it's amazing, too, because she wrote those books probably from the late 50s, the Ramona novels, until the year 2000.
Really?
So, yes.
Wow.
So that was her. I think the last book that she wrote was the last book in the Ramona series, was the last book that she wrote. And I guess she
didn't realize that.
Because she just passed away this past year.
Yes, and she was very elderly.
104.
Yeah.
Wow.
We should all be so talented and so lucky.
Yeah, no kidding.
She's impressive.
Yeah, and
really
she was
iconic.
Yeah, and she inspired me to write, reading her books. So when you have awesome books like yours that inspire kids to read and to just be fascinated by the stories that they're reading, I mean, that can make a child, regardless of what situation they're coming from, whether let's just say they don't have the best home life like I had, or even if you have a child that maybe they have a great home life or whatever the case may be, but maybe they need something to pique their interest in something else. Stay away from the video games, do something else, be engaged a different way. Reading is an awesome way of doing that.
That's right. It is. And I mean, no matter who you are as a child, you have challenges.
Right.
You can have, very dire situations, or you can have, a fairly regular kind of upbringing where you're not being challenged at home a lot, but you still need an escape. You still need to go somewhere, because you're still dealing with people in the playground, or you're dealing with, something you've seen on television that's made you uncomfortable, or again, I'm dating myself. I keep talking about television. Anyway, I agree though. I think reading, and you would agree with that too, Quinny. I mean, you were a great reader.
I was an avid reader growing up. Yeah, I agree. And it's wonderful for kids to have that. Yeah. And when it really helps them, it's nice. It's nice to be a part of that too. So I love hearing that you think that our books are a great escape for children.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
I think they are, and I can't wait to read the next one that's coming out.
Well, thank you.
So I'm looking forward to that. And I
Mhm.
wanted to ask you too, what is the targeted age range for your books?
You go ahead with that.
So 6 to 10 is our target age range, but kids could read it younger, and they could certainly read it older than that too.
Right.
It's a enjoyable, like I said, early chapter book, but we're aiming 6 to 10-year-olds.
Yeah. The other funny thing is we've discovered a lot of elderly people love our books.
Really?
Like one lady got 12 copies to hand out to her friends, and she's in her 80s. Because
Wow.
she said that there's a scene in here where the children play in the barn. And she said it took her back to when she was a kid, growing up in Scotland. They lived in the country, and that was what they used to do. They'd play in the barn. I'm not going to give away too much about what they do in the barn. She said it was just like reading about herself and her siblings playing. And she said, I read it over and over. It made me so happy. And that made us happy too, because people have told us they bought them to share with their grandchildren, and just talk about, it's not like they're set in the olden days. It's not like they're Laura Ingalls Wilder or something like that, but they're set, like you say, in a time when kids just kind of, well, and in the city, they'd say, come back when the street lights come on, right? And in the country, they would just say, well, if you set out on your bike, for example, because I grew up in the country, your parents didn't know where you were. And they would say, well, when you get to your friend's house, call us to let us know you got there, kind of thing. But there were no cell phones or anything to be in touch with your kids,
Right.
which I think maybe is scary for a lot of people to think about. But that was just the way it was. So we kind of set it in those times because we thought, well, that way the kids are stuck. They gotta figure it out for themselves.
And that's a good lesson for kids too.
That they are capable. They can figure it out for themselves, given the opportunity. That's something that in the second book, again, I'm not going to give anything away, but Gemma is just so surprised at how well they can figure things out for themselves, just given the opportunity, So, yeah, I think a lot of respect for children in our books,
Now,
And No, go ahead, please.
I wanted to ask you, now you're both parents, which I think is awesome. And so in each of your own opinions, what is the most important aspects of being a positive and effective parent? And I'm sure you two probably share a lot of views on this. So,
Well, thankfully we do, don't we?
Yeah.
I'm flattered by the fact that we do, but shall I start since Well, I always used to say, I think the most important thing that you can do as a parent is just know that everything your child does, no matter how bizarre or annoying or whatever, is normal. If you come at it and say it's all normal, but not necessarily appropriate, then the child never feels like there's something wrong with them.
right.
So for example, I had a child, I have 4 children, and my son, I have 3 daughters, and then I have 2 daughters, and then I had twins, boy-girl twins.
Wow.
And my son, he was just a little live wire. So for example, he might run into a house. Yeah, when he was like 1 year old, he was fast. And he would be like a little chimp. He'd be like right up onto the dining room table.
Wow.
No kidding. And he'd be so happy. And, I'd have to take him off the table and explain to him that it was normal to want to be on the table, because the same way he'd go to the park and want to be at the top of the monkey bars or at the top of that rock cliff or whatever, but it wasn't appropriate. You had to keep your feet on the floor in the house and that kind of stuff. That way he never, I didn't say, what are you doing up there? Get off that table. He didn't get a weird feeling about himself. He just felt like, note to self, tables are not for walking on. And that way I think it's always a challenge, because obviously you're tired some days, but they never feel uncomfortable in their own skin. They're like, oh, I'm okay here. I need to learn the rules, but I'm fine,
Yeah, I would second that, because growing up with mom having that attitude, that was awesome, because it was really good for us. And I think also another thing that I grew up with that I do as well is helping my kids put their emotions into words. So if my older daughter just turned 3, so she's talks all the time now, but if she's feeling angry or she's feeling sad or whatever her emotion is, helping her find the language to explain to me why she's feeling like that. And in doing that, she can understand her own emotions better. and then she can help herself. So I think that's another thing that I grew up with that I think is really important.
Yeah, that
for
was
kids.
vital. That's
Yeah.
vital.
Yeah.
When they're furious, you know, because little children, as you know, get furious. When they're furious and they're just driving you crazy because they're so mad, you know.
Yeah. Why do you feel that way? Tell me why you feel that way.
Yeah.
Helping them find
Giving
the
them
words
words.
to express,
Yeah.
express their emotions.
Yeah, that really helps.
Yeah.
Tell me, if you will, tell the listeners and the viewers about the next book that's coming out pretty soon.
Okay, we will. January 25th, Adventures at Almosta Farm. And
It's available on Amazon.
that's right. It's available on Amazon. It's actually available anywhere books are sold if you ask for it by name. It won't be, you know, stocked on the shelves, but you can certainly order it through any bookstore. And it's just, as we say, it's the second book in the series. We're hoping to do lots and lots of books. It's the same as this one in that it's a chapter book. It's aimed at children 6 to 10. It's a continuation of the story of Gemma and her cousins as they just go about their daily lives and have a laugh and learn about compromise. What else could we say about the book?
Yeah, you know, when things aren't perfect, so if people begin to quarrel or someone's cross with you, how do you handle that? What does she do?
Yeah.
So that's essentially what it's about. Yeah, her coming to just getting more and more comfortable where she is at Almosta Farm.
And in yourself, because that's a good point. When you're happy and everything's going your way and you're just kind of clicking along and you're with people that you've recently met, it's really fun. But the minute things go wrong and you don't know where you fit in this puzzle, you just want to go home, really, don't you?
Right.
You just want to go home where people know you and will put up your little quirks and all the rest of it. What do you do when you can't go home? How do you handle it? That's really what this story is about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I can see your book going over very well in many classrooms because there are big lessons to be learned from your books.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We would love for, you know, it to be like a read aloud for kids in classrooms.
Have you had, as a matter of fact, have you had any feedback from any teachers yet on your book?
Oh, yes. Yes, we have. We've had a lot of feedback, actually. In fact, when we first started writing this book, we had a beta reader who was a teacher, and she said, wow, this is such a great chapter book. She was the one that really helped us to see the potential for the future of putting together educational materials and things like that we'll be doing in future to go along with the books for probably grades 1, 2, 3. You know, like those early years when kids are really starting to learn to read. And yeah, teachers everywhere have told us they love it. They love the positivity. They love the lesson without it being like a bash over the head kind of a lesson. There's no lecturing or anything like that. In the book. And there's very few instances of adults appearing in our books. They come and they go. But our take, we always laugh about, you remember the old Charlie Brown? And they would have the teacher at the front of the class and all you could hear was whack, whack, whack.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
When I was a kid, I used to think, what's the teacher saying? But the truth is, the joke is for the adults there because the kids are living in their own world. Like you're there to get lunch. You know? You're there to drive them to the bookstore. You know, that kind of stuff. I mean, they adore you, of course, you know, they love you, but they're living their own lives and their big lives. So we really try to keep the adults in the background, firmly in the background in our books. And teachers have told us kids love that. They really enjoy it, that it's about kids, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it even more special that is written that way, that you're not trying to draw adults in too much, but like you said, they just come and go. And I think that's the way it should be. And it just makes it work. It just works.
Well, that's really nice to hear, isn't it?
Yeah, we love hearing that.
Yeah, they need to be there. I mean, we need adults, you know, there facilitating. But yeah, kids have their own big lives.
Wow. Well, I am so honored to have you two ladies on. It has been a thrill to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, we really enjoyed this.
This has been a lot of fun, Phil.
Yeah.
We really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you putting up with my technical difficulties.
Oh,
I had to, I did end
happens.
up switching. I tried to get the first computer to work again, didn't work. So I went to my backup computer. Yay, it works. So we were able to get this going. So I appreciate it. Heather, Quinn, thank you both so very much for coming on the podcast today. And best of luck to you with your book that's coming out. And tell us the title again.
You go ahead.
Yeah, so it's Adventures at Almosta Farm, and it's coming out January 25th.
And it is available on Amazon.
Indeed. Yeah, it's available. This book is available in hardcover, paperback, ebook, and audiobook.
Right.
And the other will be as well. We haven't yet done the audiobook for Adventures at Almosta Farm, but we will be doing an audiobook for that too.
Oh, one quick question. I'm glad you mentioned the audiobook, because I noticed that you did do one for the first one. And how did you go about choosing a reader for the book? So how is that process for you? Because I've always wondered how that works.
That was actually really fun.
That
but
was
I'll let
fun.
you
No,
talk
you
about
go ahead.
that.
You want me to?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, we had a lot of fun with that because we started talking about doing an audiobook. And then we thought, well, why not? We love audiobooks and they're terrific to have in the car. You know, if you're taking the kids somewhere, going on a holiday, we always used to listen to audiobooks as a family when we went on family holidays and that sort of thing. So what we did was we auditioned actors who are specialists in reading audiobooks.
Wow.
And we probably heard 14 or 15 different actors read our story for us. And they just give you a sample and you just decide who sounds right. And we just heard our narrator, Andrea, and she just nailed it, didn't she? We just thought,
so fun. Yeah, the way she read it.
She
That's how we
had-
imagined it.
she has the British accent and she almost makes it sounds like almost like a classic kid's story, kind of like as if you're hearing Enid Blyton's story being read or something like that. It just had a really good ring and we've had really good feedback. I mean, we'd love to have more reviews. And I will quickly say that anybody who's read the book or listened to the audiobook, if you review it, we would so appreciate that because it makes a big, big difference. But the feedback we've had personally on the audiobook's been terrific. People love it.
Yeah. Yeah, so we auditioned, we chose her, and then she records it for us.
It was pretty quick.
Yeah, it was a pretty quick process because it's such
Yeah.
a short book, so it's pretty quick for her to read.
Yeah.
And then you just put it online and
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways to do that. You can do it through ACX, which is the Amazon company that does audiobooks.
Mhm.
You can also do it through Findaway Voices, who publish audiobooks wide, which means on lots of different platforms. So
Yes.
there's lots of ways to do it. It really requires research and just deciding what's right for you.
Wanted to ask you really quickly too before we signed off. Do you have a website and links for your Instagram and such that people can connect with you and follow
Yes.
you?
yeah, so our website is heatherandquinn.com.
Yeah, heatherandquinn.com.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you know our Instagram.
Yeah, Instagram, we're the same. Heather and Quinn, that's our handle on Instagram. We have a very active community there and we just love it. It's so much fun. Like I say, the people are fantastic, but you can certainly reach us there and you can reach us through our website. We also, in the back of our books, we have information about how you can contact us. You can even post us things. We set up a post box just for our readers so that if anybody wanted to draw us pictures or send us news or, send us mail or whatever, they could do that.
That's awesome. And one quick note about the Instagram community, you're right. It's amazing how many authors are able to connect and just share their stories. And it's been a real learning experience for me because that's how I've met some of my authors that I've interviewed on the podcast through Instagram.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it just makes a huge difference to have that connective audience out there and this big circle of authors, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. And readers, because
Yes.
we're really connected with a lot of our readers there and they're so much fun. They really give us a lot of feedback and help us to understand the kinds of stories that they want to read. So that's really important for us to hear from our readers. We love to hear what they want to see.
Now, see, another question just popped into my head. I'm sorry, I know I'm drawing this up, but I have to ask this. Feedback from readers, from kids.
Yeah.
What has been your most humorous or most heartwarming feedback that you've gotten from kids?
Oh God, there's so much of it. I don't even know if we could.
Well,
something.
One, if you can think of
really
it.
Funny, because most of them, they're reading the story and they're just saying, please give us more. I guess the funny thing is,
Aw.
when we first wrote this book, it was the parents that wrote to us, and they were funny, weren't they, too? Like, they would say to us, oh my goodness, now she wants to do and blah, blah. Like, it's a story book. So that was kind of funny. But they want the next book. They're like, Mom, go buy the next book. And then the mom or the dad, they're like, or whomever's buying it, it's not out yet. So they're saying, when's the next book? We're saying, okay, we've got one in January, we've got another coming in July. So, we're hoping that once we have sort of 5, 6, 7 of these books out there, then things will really take off, because people will be able to say, oh, goody, here's a bunch of books that I can buy.
Yeah,
for my
easy.
kids.
Yeah, easy to find for their children.
Right.
Yeah.
And they can fly through them.
And that's how you know that what you're doing is working. When you have kids wanting you to write more books and they can't wait for the next book to come out, that's awesome. And that's the way it was for me, reading books. Oh, when's the next book coming out?
Yeah.
I was that way when I was a child too. So that's awesome. So that just goes to show that you ladies are doing a magnificent job. So
Well, that's really sweet of you to say. Thank you.
So
We appreciate that.
well,
We really appreciate your time today too.
Yeah.
oh, you're welcome. Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy weekend and to do the podcast interview. So again, ladies, thank you so much. We have Heather, we have Quinn. Ladies, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And I hope to have you on again.
Definitely. We love that.
Yeah.
We've enjoyed it.
So I'd love to talk about the next book with you. So that would be awesome. So
Sounds
thank
good.
you.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. So with that, everyone, that is it for this episode of the Total Podcast with me, your host, Phil Scott. Everyone stay safe, be careful out there, take care of one another, and we will talk again soon.